Panda froze, a single paw hovering above the jagged threshold of the cavern. Behind him, the jungle was a wall of golden warmth, vibrant and alive, but the air at his back was already shifting. A cry pierced the heavy silence, thin, sharp, and unmistakably desperate. It was Raimi. Panda pivoted, his claws gripping the rough stone of the cave mouth. The opening was a void, exhaling a breath of cold, metallic air that bit into his nose and lungs. No creature had ever returned from this place. The dark seemed to pull at him, heavy and absolute. No creature had ever returned from this place. The dark seemed to pull at him, heavy and absolute, then forced his weight forward. He crossed the threshold. The thick curtain of vines parted with a wet, tearing sound, slapping against his shoulders as he disappeared into the shadow. He did not look back. The transition was immediate. The heat of the world he knew vanished, replaced by a cold that settled deep into his bones. He took the first step into the hollow, ringing silence of the dark, guided only by the lingering echo of that thin, sharp cry. The forest hum died instantly, severed as if by a blade. In its place, a hollow, ringing stillness pressed against Panda's ears. He stood still for several heartbeats, letting his eyes adjust, but the darkness remained absolute. His breath began to crystallize in the freezing air, drifting before him in faint, ghostly plumes. He pushed forward, his shoulders scraping against the narrow tunnel walls. The stone was slick with a thin layer of moisture that felt like oil beneath his touch. Suddenly, a faint, sickly green luminescence flickered along the rock faces. It was moss, clinging to the damp stone in jagged patches. The light was weak, revealing only the next few feet of jagged rock and nothing more. He reached out to test the ground, his pads finding only uneven, slippery surfaces. The cold was not merely a temperature, it was a physical weight that slowed his gait. He moved deeper, his claws clicking rhythmically against the stone. The only sound in a world that seemed to have forgotten the existence of noise. Each step was a gamble, the moss offering just enough light to avoid a fall, but not enough to show what lay ahead in the suffocating dark. Panda kept his weight low, his eyes fixed on the patches of green moss that guided his path. The tunnel seemed to stretch forward indefinitely, a throat of damp, unyielding stone. He took a cautious step, testing the floor with his weight, but the surface beneath his paw did not hold. It vanished. The solid ground gave way to a steep, slick decline that pitched downward into pure blackness. Panda lunged for a grip, his claws raking violently against the rock, but the slope was polished smooth by centuries of moisture. He lost his footing. He tumbled forward, his body skidding down the incline with terrifying speed. Sparks showered into the air as his claws fought for purchase, the stone screaming against his palms. He felt the rapid shift in pressure as he plummeted, the air rushing past his ears in a high, whistling gale. Then, the slide ended as abruptly as it began. He hit the bottom with a jarring thud, the impact sending a shockwave through his joints. He scrambled to his feet, gasping for air, his chest heaving as his heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. The silence returned, thicker and colder than before, and he stood frozen, waiting for his vision to pierce the absolute dark. Panda stood motionless, his ears twitching in the hollow dark. He held his breath, waiting for the sound to resolve. It came again. Tap, 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 tap. 4 rhythmic strikes against solid stone. It was deliberate, precise, and entirely out of place in this tomb of silence. He pushed off the wall, moving toward the source of the noise. The tunnel narrowed, then twisted sharply to the right. He rounded the bend, his claws scraping softly against the floor, and stopped dead. Before him, the tunnel opened into a space of impossible scale. It was a subterranean cathedral, vast and arched. Thousands of amber crystals were embedded in the floor, each one pulsing with a steady, warm light. The glow did not illuminate the space evenly. Instead, It threw long, flickering shadows that danced across the high ceiling like living things. The air here felt different, heavy with a strange humming energy that vibrated against his fur. He took a cautious step forward, the light reflecting in his eyes, revealing the sheer extent of the glowing expanse. The tapping sound echoed once more, clearer now, pulling him deeper into the amber light. Panda scanned the chamber, his gaze sweeping over the pulsing amber floor until it locked onto the center. A massive stone slab lay tilted over a narrow fissure, bridging a gap in the crystals. There, protruding from the dark void beneath the rock, a tiny paw struck the stone. Tap, 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 tap. It was a frantic, desperate movement. Panda surged forward, his heavy paws striking the crystal floor with urgency. But as his weight shifted onto the center of the chamber, the floor reacted. The warm amber light beneath his feet flickered violently, struggling before bleeding into a deep, warning crimson. The color spread outward from his position like a ripple in a pool. The ground beneath the stone slab groaned, a low, tectonic vibration that traveled up through his legs. The massive slab shifted, sinking deeper into the widening crevice with a sound of grinding rock. The chamber's pulse quickened, the light turning a harsh, throbbing red that cast jagged, agitated shadows against the walls. The floor tilted under his weight as the stability of the cathedral began to fail. He was no longer just walking, he was racing against the very foundations of the cave. Panda did not hesitate. He lunged across the final stretch of unstable crystal, his momentum carrying him directly to the edge of the stone slab. He jammed his shoulder beneath the jagged lip of the rock, bracing his feet against the groaning floor. He pushed. His muscles coiled under his fur, straining against the immense weight of the slab, but the stone was anchored deep within the earth. It did not budge. The rock bit into his shoulder, sharp and unyielding, while the slab ground further into the fissure with a sound of splintering crystal. The tectonic rumble deepened, turning into a low, vibrating roar that shook the entire chamber. Beneath the slab, the gap widened instantly. The tiny, trembling paw that had been striking the stone vanished as the surface shifted. The slab sank inches deeper, dragging the entire structure toward the yawning black void below. Panda roared, a sound of raw frustration, and threw his entire body weight against the rock again. It remained locked, immovable as the mountain itself. The floor tilted violently, throwing him off balance, and the fissure opened wider, hungry and dark, as the ground continued its downward slide into the deep. Panda roared again, a guttural sound that echoed off the cathedral walls. He abandoned all sense of caution. He drove his full weight against the slab, bracing his hind legs against a cluster of unyielding crystals. The rock bit deep into his shoulder, but he did not pull back. He shoved, his muscles corded and straining to the point of failure. The slab groaned. It shifted an inch. He roared once more, a final, explosive heave that sent a tremor through his entire frame. The stone slipped, then rolled aside with a deafening crash, colliding with the pulsing crystals nearby. The fissure lay exposed. Panda reached into the jagged black opening without a second thought. His claws brushed something soft. He hooked his grip into the scruff of a neck and pulled with everything he had left. Rami emerged from the dark, small and trembling, gasping for the heavy air of the chamber. He was out. Panda did not pause. He set the smaller creature down, his breathing ragged, his own body trembling with the sudden release of pressure. For one heartbeat, they stood together in the center of the glowing floor, the silence of the rescue ringing in their ears. The amber glow did not fade. It died. One moment the chamber was a sea of rhythmic, warm light, and the next, the crystals turned a jagged, warning crimson. Then, darkness. The light vanished instantly. A deep, tectonic grind tore through the stone floor, followed by the sharp, rhythmic snap of fracturing rock from above. The ceiling began to rain stone, Fragments the size of fists hammered the floor, shattering the remaining crystals into dust. Panda did not look back. He shoved Rami toward the tunnel entrance, his body tense and ready. A boulder, heavy and jagged, plummeted from the shadows above, aimed directly at the smaller creature. Panda lunged, twisting his body to intercept the impact. The rock slammed into his back with the force of a falling tree, knocking the wind from his lungs. He grunted, ignored the searing pain, and pushed Rami forward. More stone fell. Debris rained, cathedral a death trap, each step a gamble. Boulders shattered against his spine and shoulders, but he kept his head low. He shielded the exit, the cathedral collapsing. The tunnel throat was screaming. Stone ground against stone, a high-pitched, metallic shriek that vibrated in their teeth. The ceiling dropped, then dropped again, forcing them to their knees. Panda kept his back arched, a living shield against the descending rock. They crawled, the walls squeezed in, the gap narrowing to a jagged slit. Dust choked the air. The exit was a sliver of green light ahead, pulsing through the thick curtain of vines. The cave mouth began to buckle. Boulders shifted, sliding downward, sealing the throat of the tunnel. It was closing. Panda roared, a final, guttural effort, and lunged. He pushed Rami ahead, a blind, desperate shove that sent the smaller creature tumbling toward the light. Panda followed, his momentum carrying him into the air. He hit the vines, tearing through the heavy foliage. Behind him, the cave mouth imploded. The sound was a dull, final thud. The earth surged upward, sealing the darkness forever. He landed hard, sliding across the dirt as the world fell silent. The ground was solid, no groaning rock, no shifting stone, just the damp, cool earth of the jungle floor. Panda lay where he had landed, his lungs burning with every jagged breath. Beside him, Rami curled into a ball, shaking as the adrenaline drained away. The air here was different. It carried the scent of rain, crushed leaves, and wet moss. The terrifying, hollow silence of the cave was gone, replaced by the vibrant, messy hum of the forest. Distant birds began to call again. The rhythm of the living world returned, steady and indifferent to the horror they had narrowly survived. Panda rolled onto his side, his muscles stiff, his pulse finally beginning to slow. He reached out, nudging Rami with a heavy paw. The smaller creature opened its eyes, blinked, and let out a long, shuddering sigh of relief. They stayed there in the tall grass for a long time, listening to the wind move through the canopy. The cave was sealed. The darkness was buried. Above them, the sun filtered through the leaves in golden, flickering patches. They were alive, and for the first time in hours, the only sound that mattered was the steady beat of their own hearts.